Gotta get in here and find the frequency.
Are you getting this?
Yep.
Yes, bloopers. Good afternoon and welcome to Business Over Beers. This afternoon I'm here with Jordan Duffy from Buckham and Duffy Consultants. What do you consult in?
Technology innovation and rapid prototyping and development.
Today is about discussing how everybody can get involved and react and how they can perceive what was announced just a day ago.
2 days ago now.
2 days ago now?
How they can harness the innovation agenda.
How they can harness the innovation agenda. So we'll be going through the agenda, talking about how it can affect you, how you can take advantage of it, what it actually means, so you can get your head around it through someone who actually works in the innovation space and someone who knows how to make it easy for you. So let's kick it with the first part of the agenda.
Yeah, I think so. There's a few parts of this agenda, and it depends on what kind of space you're in. But pretty much, if you're a researcher through to a startup or an entrepreneur or an educator or even an investor, the federal government has put a lot of things in here that once you decrypt them, you can really find exactly what it is that you'll benefit from. So I think if we start on the culture and capital point of view, so from capital, the first part is tax breaks. So if you're an investor and you come along and you want to invest in an early stage startup or an early stage business, you've got pretty much instant 20% tax deduction or offset. It's non-refundable, so it means you won't be able to actually get a refund from the government, but if you do have a tax debt to pay, you can then offset basically 20% of your investment. So if you invest $200,000 into a startup, you'll get 40%. So 20% is $40,000 off your tax bill at the end of the year. The good bit as well is because you're investing at early stage, you're going to need to hold on to that investment for a while. So you've got about 3 years. It's a 3-year hold term. So you have to hold on to that investment in the startup for 3 years and wait for them to start really kind of making profit anyway. But then for 10 years of that holding, whenever you want to sell out, you don't have to pay capital gains. So if you hold on to them for more than 10 years, you will pay capital gains. But if you get rid of them before 10 years and over 3 years, pretty much you've got a pretty good tax holiday. So it's a great incentive to jump in and start investing in startups.
So do you think that the 20% tax rebate is going to kickstart a whole generation of new style investors? And also, do you think that's going to give maybe a fake sense to businesses? So people are going to go a bit wild with their investing and try and prop up people that actually don't have solid businesses or solid business ideas?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you've got a couple of ways. I think you will see more of the mum and dad or self-managed super fund investor coming along and going, this is a good way for me to, one, get a tax offset, and two, to actually find a way to invest in something that isn't property. Australia's a very property heavy investment market, or isn't a term deposit. So it's a good way to basically start the innovation journey, but it will require an amount of education. And if people aren't educated in what a good startup looks like and what their growth plan is, and if they haven't done, hey kitty,
Lara Croft.
If you don't have a development pathway and you're not going to be able to stay competitive, then there needs to be more to the investment than just the money. So, and that's where I think a lot of the other parts interlink with the tax incentive. The next bit, I guess, which is good, is that if people still want to take advantage of those tax incentives, they can go through an early stage venture fund, and that's basically a managed fund where they pick the right startups to go into. So you don't have to do the guessing anymore, and you still get quite a good tax incentive. It's a 10% offset, but essentially they increase the amount you can invest and increase the size of those funds from about 100 million to 200 million. So that means that places like Blue Sky, Blue Chili, Fishburners, they're going to have a lot more flexibility, and the people who invest in those companies can then get an instant benefit.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to go back to that sort of section where you talked about the information required or the understanding required to invest. We found since starting Little Tokyo 2 that although we don't focus on startups, we found that there is plenty of money and plenty of investors to go around, but there aren't that many investment ready startups.
Organizations,
or organizations. Why is there so much talk about investing when there isn't that much talk about actually educating the startups on what's required or where they need to get to before they can get investment?
Yeah, so the whole idea of this, looking specifically at the investment wing of this agenda, is that when you put money in front of people, the people will come. And when there's people wanting to invest, the more advisors will pop up, more mentors and more structured programs. Until now, there has been, there's been VCs around, there's been people who want to invest, but there hasn't been an active push to bridge that gap between where the startup is and where they need to be to actually get money in the door and then start turning profit. What this is going to do is basically, with things like the incubator support package, the mentoring programs, they're matching the investment that's coming in with support systems and knowledge transfer systems, essentially. With the funds as well, there's a heavy focus with the funds to have a knowledge component. Obviously, they don't want to make a bad investment. So they're going to be doing their own research and their own support and mentoring activities to ensure that the startups get from, what might be a good idea to something that is commercially viable for a scalable amount of time. I think that it's going to be an interesting market to watch because there's a lot of different quantifications or qualifications of what people think a good startup means, and there's no big matrix table that will just let you pick and choose, does it have this, does it have that, especially in a market as volatile as the new digital era. We don't know what technology will be successful now or in 10 years. They're very hard questions to answer. And especially in our line of work, like when we build things that we don't even know if there's going to be an ROI, but they have to be investigated. And if you don't investigate them, then you'll never know. So we're kind of coming to a time where things won't be specifically analysed on ROI, because you won't know what the market's ready to adopt and whether they'll use it excessively. It's sometimes going to be it is a bit of a risk, and hence why there's such an aversion to VC and investment. So. But what the good thing about this is that financially it's helping the investors. From a startup point of view, it's supporting the incubators, and there's new programs to educate those people and put more knowledge resources in those incubators. And I think culturally it's bringing awareness to what a startup is, the issues in the startup ecosystem. It's not perfect. But on the other side is the investment wing of, okay, we know it's risky, the government's going to support you in taking that risk. So I don't think it's a perfect solution. I think probably more money could have been spent in the incubator phase of this agenda. I also think that the next piece that we're going to talk about here is intangible assets, for example. Patents and copyrights are now depreciated. You can now depreciate those assets even though they're not a physical object, which is great. But honestly, a lot of startups aren't going to go to market with a patent. They'll probably go to market first as soon as they can and maybe pay them later.
100%. So try and be first and fastest and most agile.
Yeah, totally.
One last point I just want to touch on with the investment base. I just came from a talk with Black Sheep Capital, and they said that it still takes a lot of due diligence and a long time to actually get investment. So it's worth putting your actual efforts into getting sales, which is the most important part of business, than looking to investment very early on.
Yeah.
How easily and quickly do you think that investment will become? For example, will we have sort of middle class people throwing money at startups now? How sort of easily accessible do you think it will become?
Look, I kind of hope not. It takes a certain investor to understand the startup market, and I don't think we're going to have instant adoption from people who would typically be investing in the commodity markets or foreign exchange. You're not going to get those sort of sophisticated investors over the line immediately to come and start investing in high risk portfolios. I don't think that's going to be an overnight thing, and it's going to take 6 months for these reforms to go through anyway, and I think people will start planning. Where I do think this makes things easier is the people who are around those startups that typically provide their seed. All of a sudden, they've got a tax benefit. So the mum and dads and the friends and family who are propping up these startups anyway and giving that seed phase of investment, all of a sudden they get a tax holiday. Well, not a holiday, it's a 20% offset and no capital gains. So if they do make money, they're in the black, it's a good thing for them.
Mm.
I don't think we're going to see a rush of middle income earners spontaneously going out and finding startups to invest in. I think that's more likely to be a journey where they'll go and find a fund that understands the startup market. Just like any investment you make, any investment or market you don't understand is a bad investment. So I think that's where the middle income earners would rather go to, an incubator or a fund that already has an understanding.
Yeah.
And that also comes into how do you now measure, how do you measure a failure is changing as well. So the new bankruptcy reforms essentially 3 years down to 1 year. So that's a big change. And in an investment point of view, how do you measure the risk of an investment on your ROI if you've now basically got a risk of, rather than having to wait 3 years, they're only waiting 1 year. 12 months is not a long time. And I personally think that as long as there is transparency, that is a good thing. The only time when that becomes a dangerous avenue is when there is not transparency in the transaction. So if a startup comes in and has a brand new idea and the investor does not understand how they became bankrupt or got into that situation the last time, there's no learning. There's no outcome from a failure. And I think failure is good as long as you can quantify it and you can understand why.
100%. People going out and saying it's good to fail and we should push people towards failure purposefully. I don't think that's really the right answer.
It's not a black and white situation. I think I think failure, the more you're failing, the more you're trying, and that's great. But if you're not learning from it, it's pointless, and that's where you go in a circle.
As the last part to this segment, is this the best time there's ever been in Australia to start a startup?
100%. After seeing this on Monday, we just launched a website called ideaboom.com.au, coined by Prime Minister Turnbull as Australia seeing the idea boom. And I think for everyone across the board, this is, to be honest, whether or not these reforms pass or not, this is now one of the best times in the history of the Australian economy to start a startup and to be capitalising on knowledge that needs to be developed and creating our own products. I mean, the commodity and resource markets are dead or they're dying. And the jobs all the way from administrator or admin assistant all the way through to people working in the mines, construction, the big four consulting firms that support those companies, they're going to feel over the next 5 years that lack of capital investment in the infrastructure, supporting commodity and resources, as well as the commodity price dropping. So now is the best time. I've never seen a better time to start actually pursuing those ideas you have. And as long as you're actually starting to, as I said, quantify, it's all about measurement. And sometimes it's not as simple as going, well, I'm going to start a startup and 1 + 1 = 2 and therefore it's a good idea. It's about reading the market. And if you understand what the market's going to want and you can get out there and prove that, go for it. But if you can't prove it, don't start it.
And the best way to prove it through validation is by asking people who may actually need whatever the product is. So collaboration is key. So get out there and ask people exactly what's happening.
Exactly. That's why I love working at Little Tokyo, because we work with enterprise clients, but all the way down to startups. I am able to talk to people about ideas and instantly qualify them, or throw them out the window if they're shit and sell them up.
So there you have it. As part of the first segment for the $1 billion announcement, you heard it here first. It's the time to start something and follow your dream. The only time in history this has happened, and the time is now. This is the Jock Fairweather YouTube channel. If you'd like to discuss more with me, myself, or Mr. Duffy, we call him Duff Duff, please comment on the comment section below, and let's talk more about how we can enable and support you with your idea.